Hi, I'm Marcus. Christmas Eve, and I'm staring at a sleeping bag spread across oil stains in my in-laws' garage. My wife Sarah just handed me a pillow that smells like motor oil and said, "Don't be dramatic, it's just one night." When I asked where I was supposed to sleep, her mother Patricia smiled and said, "Well, family gets the beds, you understand." But what they didn't understand was that I owned every single house on this block. And what happened next would change everything forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The snow was coming down hard that December 23rd, when Sarah and I pulled into her parents' driveway in suburban Milwaukee. I'd been dreading this trip for weeks, but Sarah had insisted we spend Christmas with her family. 3 days, she'd promised. Just 3 days of playing nice with people who treated me like I was something they'd scrape off their shoe. I should have known something was wrong when Patricia answered the door in her fake fur coat, the one she wore when she wanted to remind everyone she had money. Her smile was tight, practiced, the kind reserved for door-to-door salesmen and unwanted guests. "Sarah, darling," she cooed, wrapping my wife in a hug that lasted just long enough to make me feel invisible. "And Marcus," she added, her voice dropping 2 octaves like she was announcing a dental appointment. Behind her stood Richard, Sarah's father, built like a retired linebacker with hands that had never seen honest work. He gave me the same look he'd been giving me for the past 4 years, like I was a stray dog that kept showing up at their porch. No handshake, no greeting, just a grunt and a turn toward the living room. Come in," Patricia chirped, but her eyes were already scanning past me to the street, probably hoping the neighbors weren't watching her son-in-law carry his own luggage. The house smelled like cinnamon and superiority. Everything was perfectly arranged, from the crystal figurines on the mantel to the white leather couch that nobody was allowed to actually sit on. It was the kind of place where you felt guilty for breathing too loudly. Sarah's brother Kevin was sprawled across the good couch, the one facing the big screen TV, his feet propped up on the glass coffee table. He looked up from his phone just long enough to smirk at me. Well, look what the cat dragged in, Kevin," Sarah warned, but there was no real heat in it. There never was when her family got their digs in. "What? I'm just saying hello to my favorite brother-in-law." He grinned, showing teeth that his parents had spent $20,000 straightening. "How's the construction business, Marcus? Still getting your hands dirty?" I'd been running my own construction company for 8 years, started with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox my grandfather left me. Now I had 12 full-time employees and more work than I could handle. But to the Morrison family, I'd always be the blue-collar guy who wasn't good enough for their precious daughter. "Business is good," I said, setting our bags down by the door. "Real good, actually." Richard snorted from his recliner. "That's what they all say right before they go under." Patricia shot him a look, the kind married couples develop after 30 years of practice. "Richard, please. We're being rude." She turned back to me with that plastic smile. "Marcus, we're so glad you could make it. I know how busy you must be with your little company." Little company. Like calling the Pacific Ocean a puddle. "Actually, Mom," Sarah said, squeezing my arm, "Marcus just landed the biggest contract of his career. Tell them about the downtown project, honey." I could feel all their eyes on me, waiting for me to either brag or downplay it. Either way, I'd lose. "It's just a renovation job," I said. "Nothing special." But Sarah was beaming, proud in a way that made my chest tight. "Nothing special. Marcus is renovating the entire Riverside district. 12 buildings, commercial and residential. It's huge." The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin's smirk faltered for just a second before returning full force. "Riverside, that dump. Good luck collecting payment from those deadbeats." "Kevin," Patricia said sharply, but her eyes were calculating. I could practically see the wheels turning. How much was a contract like that worth? How much was Marcus actually making? And more importantly, how could they benefit from it? "Well," she said finally, "isn't that wonderful? I'm sure you'll do your best with it. Your best." Like I was a child showing off a crayon drawing. The rest of the evening was more of the same. Dinner was served on the good china, the kind with more forks than any reasonable person needed. I sat at the far end of the table, next to the kitchen door where the help would sit if they had help. Sarah was placed between her parents where she belonged in their eyes. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Patricia talked about her book club and her charity work, the kind where rich women in expensive clothes felt good about themselves by writing checks. Richard pontificated about the stock market and his golf game, interrupting himself only to refill his wine glass. Kevin bragged about his latest promotion at the marketing firm where he pushed papers around and called it strategy. "So Marcus," Patricia said suddenly, turning her attention to me like a spotlight, "Sarah tells us you grew up in the city. That must have been interesting." "Interesting. Code for rough, poor, undesirable. South Side," I confirmed, cutting into the overpriced steak that tasted like cardboard. "My mom raised me there after my dad died." "Oh yes, the accident," Patricia said with mock sympathy. "How tragic. And your mother, does she still live there?" "She passed away 3 years ago." The words came out flat, emotionless. I'd learned not to show weakness around these people. "I'm so sorry," she said, but her tone suggested she was anything but. "It must be hard, not having family for the holidays." That's when it hit me. The setup, the casual cruelty. She was reminding me that I was alone, that I needed them more than they needed me. That Sarah was all I had left. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's why we're here, Mom. Marcus is family now." Richard snorted into his wine. "Family is blood, not paperwork." The words hung in the air like smoke from a cigarette. Sarah's face went white, then red. "Dad, that's enough." "What?" "I'm just saying there's a difference between family and in-laws. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Except everything." "Richard," Patricia said in her warning voice, but I could see she agreed with him. They all did. After dinner, Patricia announced the sleeping arrangements with the efficiency of a drill sergeant. "Sarah, you'll have your old room, of course. Kevin is in the guest room, and Marcus." The pause stretched like taffy. I waited, knowing whatever came next wouldn't be good. "Well, the thing is, we've been using the basement as storage, and there's really nowhere else. He can sleep on the couch," Sarah said quickly. "Oh no, dear, that won't work. Your father has his sleep apnea. You know how he gets up at night. And the couch is right there in the living room." Another pause. Patricia's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I thought maybe the garage. It's insulated, and we have a space heater. There's even a cot out there from when Kevin went through his camping phase." "The garage." She wanted me to sleep in the garage like a dog. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Mom, you can't be serious. It's just one night, darling. 2 at most. And really Marcus won't mind, will you? You're used to roughing it, aren't you?" All eyes were on me again. This was the test. Would I make a scene? Would I embarrass Sarah by refusing? Or would I swallow my pride and sleep in the garage like the second-class citizen they believed me to be? "Of course not," I heard myself say. "Whatever works best for everyone." Patricia clapped her hands together like I'd just agreed to donate a kidney. "Wonderful. Kevin, be a dear, and show Marcus where everything is." Kevin led me through the kitchen to the door that connected to the garage. He flipped on the fluorescent light, and I got my first look at my accommodations. Concrete floor, pegboard walls lined with tools that had never been used, and in the corner, a camping cot that looked like it had been through a war. "Home sweet home," Kevin said with a chuckle. "Don't worry, the space heater works, most of the time." He pointed to an ancient-looking device that probably violated several fire codes. "And there's a bathroom in the basement if you need it. Just go through that door, down the stairs, past the water heater. Try not to wake anyone up if you have to piss in the middle of the night." After he left, I stood alone in the garage, listening to the muffled sounds of the family settling in for the night. Upstairs, I could hear Sarah's voice. probably arguing with her mother about the sleeping arrangements. But the walls were thick, and I couldn't make out the words. I unrolled my sleeping bag on the cot and tried to ignore the smell of motor oil and old paint. The space heater wheezed to life when I plugged it in, throwing off just enough heat to take the edge off the December cold. Through the small window, I could see snow falling steadily, coating the suburban street in pristine white. That's when I heard the laughter. It was coming from upstairs, from Sarah's old room, high and bright, the laugh I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, when she was just a girl working at the coffee shop near my job site. But now it sounded different, hollow, like she was laughing at something that wasn't really funny. Then I heard Patricia's voice, muffled but clear enough. "Oh, Sarah, you should have seen his face when I mentioned the garage, like a kicked puppy." More laughter, Sarah's laughter. "Mom, stop it," Sarah said, but she was still giggling. "It's just for one night." "I know, dear, but still." The poor thing looked so confused, like he couldn't understand why we wouldn't just give him the master bedroom. My chest went tight. They were laughing at me. My own wife was laughing at me. "He'll be fine," Sarah said. "Marcus is tougher than he looks, tougher than he looks." Like I was a piece of equipment they were testing. I sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the concrete floor. This was what my marriage had become. Sarah choosing them over me, every single time, making excuses for their cruelty, laughing along with their jokes, treating me like an inconvenience they had to tolerate. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was exactly how much money I was really making, and more importantly, how I'd been spending it. 3 months ago, I'd started buying up properties in their neighborhood, quietly through shell companies and holding corporations that couldn't be traced back to me. The old Victorian on the corner that had been for sale for 6 months, the duplex across the street that the elderly owner was desperate to unload, the 3-unit apartment building 2 doors down that needed renovation. I owned 6 houses on Maple Street. In another month, I'd own 8, and by spring, if my calculations were correct, I'd own every single property on the block except for one, the Morrison family home. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contact list until I found the number I was looking for. Janet Torres, real estate agent extraordinaire, the woman who'd been helping me acquire properties with the discretion of a Swiss banker. It was late, but Janet was a night owl, and this couldn't wait. "Marcus, everything okay?" "Janet, I need you to make an offer on the Morrison property, 47 Maple Street." There was a pause. "The house you're staying at." "Marcus, I thought you said that was off limits." "Plans change. How quickly can you put together an offer?" "Well, it's not officially on the market, but if they're willing to sell."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I could have preliminary paperwork ready by morning. What kind of offer are we talking about? I thought about Sarah's laughter, about sleeping in the garage while they joked about me upstairs. Make it generous, above market value, cash deal, quick closing. How generous? I told her. Janet whistled low. "Marcus, that's almost double what the house is worth." "I know exactly what it's worth. Make the offer." After I hung up, I lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. The space heater cycled on and off with mechanical precision, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the Morrison family settling in for a cozy Christmas Eve. They thought they were so clever, putting me in my place, reminding me where I stood in their hierarchy. But what they didn't understand was that I'd stopped caring about their approval a long time ago. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. In less than 12 hours, Janet would present them with an offer they couldn't refuse, an offer that would change everything. I closed my eyes and listened to the snow falling against the garage window. By this time next year, the Morrison family would be gone, scattered to whatever overpriced suburb they could afford with their windfall. And I'd be left with their house, their street, their entire world. Some people get revenge hot. They lash out in anger, make scenes, burn bridges in spectacular fashion. But I'd learned a long time ago that the best revenge is served ice cold, with paperwork and a smile. The space heater wheezed and clicked, and I drifted off to sleep on the thin mattress, dreaming of deeds and contracts and the look on Richard Morrison's face when he realized exactly who he'd been calling second class. I woke up before dawn to the sound of Patricia's coffee grinder. The space heater had given up sometime during the night, and my breath came out in white puffs. My back ached from the sagging cot, and my sleeping bag was damp with condensation. Through the small window, I could see the Morrison house glowing warm and yellow in the pre-dawn darkness. Perfect family, perfect house, perfect life. At least that's what they wanted everyone to believe. My phone buzzed. A text from Janet. Paperwork ready. Meeting with them at 9 a.m. You sure about this? I typed back quickly. Absolutely. Don't mention my name until after they accept. You're the boss. This is going to be interesting. Interesting was one word for it. I rolled up my sleeping bag and got dressed in the frigid garage. My work clothes from yesterday would have to do. Through the connecting door, I could hear the Morrison family starting their day. The coffee grinder, muffled conversations, the shower running upstairs. When I finally made my way into the kitchen, Patricia was at the stove making eggs Benedict like this was some kind of boutique hotel. She looked up with that practiced smile. Marcus, how did you sleep? I hope the garage wasn't too cold. Fine, I lied. Slept like a baby. Sarah appeared in her bathrobe, hair tousled, looking like she'd slept better than she had in months. She kissed my cheek without really looking at me. Morning, honey. Mom's making breakfast. Richard shambled in wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people made in a week. He poured himself coffee from an expensive machine and settled at the kitchen island like a king holding court. Sleep well, Marcus? He asked with barely concealed amusement. Great, really great. Kevin wandered in last, already dressed in designer jeans and a sweater that screamed expensive casual. He grabbed a piece of toast and bit into it while looking me up and down. You look a little stiff there, brother-in-law. That cot giving you trouble? Nope. Perfect. They exchanged glances, little smiles, inside jokes at my expense. I drank my coffee and watched them perform their morning routine, this carefully choreographed dance of casual cruelty. That's when the doorbell rang. Patricia frowned and glanced at the clock. Who on earth could that be at this hour? It was 8:47 a.m. Richard sighed dramatically and shuffled toward the front door. We could hear muffled voices, then footsteps returning to the kitchen. Patricia, there's a real estate agent here to see us. Says she has a business proposition. Janet Torres stepped into the kitchen, looking every inch the successful professional. Navy blue suit, expensive briefcase, confidence that commanded attention. She smiled at the assembled Morrison family, like she was delivering Christmas presents. I'm so sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve, she said with practiced sincerity, but I have a client who's very interested in purchasing your beautiful home. The silence stretched like a rubber band. Patricia's smile faltered. I'm sorry, but our house isn't for sale, she said slowly. I understand completely, Janet replied smoothly, but my client is prepared to make an extremely generous offer. Cash deal, quick closing, well above market value. Richard stepped forward, suddenly interested. How generous? Janet opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. I think you'll find the terms very attractive. She handed the paperwork to Richard, whose eyes widened as he read the numbers. Patricia peered over his shoulder, and I watched her face go through a complex series of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, greed, calculation. This can't be right, Patricia whispered. I assure you the offer is genuine, Janet said. My client is very motivated. Sarah looked confused. Mom, what's going on? Richard was still staring at the papers like they might disappear if he blinked. Someone wants to buy our house for nearly double what it's worth. Who? Kevin demanded. Who would pay that much for this place? Janet smiled. My client prefers to remain anonymous until the offer is accepted, but I can tell you he's a successful local businessman with excellent credit and the ability to close quickly. I sipped my coffee and watched the wheels turning in their heads. This much money would solve a lot of problems. Richard's gambling debts that he thought nobody knew about. Patricia's credit card bills from her shopping addiction. Kevin's student loans that he'd been dodging for 3 years. We'd need time to think about it. Patricia said carefully, "Of course, but I should mention that the offer expires at noon today. My client has other properties he's considering." The time pressure was perfect. Janet had learned that trick from me. Give people just enough time to want something, but not enough time to think clearly. Noon, Richard sputtered. "That's barely 3 hours. I understand it's sudden," Janet said sympathetically, "but my client is flying out of town this afternoon for an extended business trip. If you're not interested, I have backup properties to present to him." She started to pack up her papers, and I could see the panic in their eyes. This kind of money didn't come along every day. In their neighborhood, in this market, they'd be lucky to get asking price for the house, let alone double. "Wait," Patricia said quickly. "Let us discuss it as a family." Janet paused, papers halfway into her briefcase. "Of course, I'll wait in my car, but please understand, the offer expires at noon, whether you've decided or not." After she left, the Morrison family huddled around the kitchen island like generals planning a war. I refilled my coffee and pretended to read the newspaper while listening to their heated whispers. "This is insane," Kevin said. "Nobody pays double for a house without seeing it first." "Maybe he has seen it," Richard mused. "Maybe he's been watching the neighborhood." Patricia shuddered. "That's creepy." "Creepy pays $750,000, Richard pointed out. Sarah looked lost. "But this is our home, your home. Where would you go? With that kind of money, we could go anywhere," Patricia said, and I could hear the greed creeping into her voice. "We could get that condo in Florida we've been talking about. Or maybe Arizona." "What about Marcus?" Sarah asked suddenly. They all turned to look at me. I kept my eyes on the newspaper, but I could feel their stares. "What about him?" Richard asked. "Well, we can't just leave him here. He doesn't have anywhere else to go for Christmas." The concern in her voice almost made me feel guilty. "Almost. He'll be fine," Patricia said dismissively. "I'm sure he has friends or something." Friends or something. Like I was a stray cat they'd been feeding. "I don't know," Sarah said uncertainly. "It feels wrong to just abandon him." Kevin snorted. "Sarah, we're talking about $750,000. Marcus is a big boy. He can take care of himself. Besides," Richard added, "it's not like we're family." Not really, not really. There it was again, the constant reminder that I didn't belong. I folded the newspaper and stood up. "You know what? I should probably head home anyway. Give you guys some privacy to make your decision." Sarah looked relieved. "Are you sure? I mean, you could stay." "No, it's fine. This is family business. I understand." I grabbed my jacket and sleeping bag, kissed Sarah goodbye like nothing was wrong, and headed for the door. "Marcus," Patricia called after me. "Thank you for being so understanding." Understanding, right. I walked out to my truck and drove around the block, parking where I could see the Morrison house, but they couldn't see me. At 11:23 a.m., Janet's car pulled up to the curb. She walked to the front door with a confidence that told me everything I needed to know. The Morrisons had taken the bait. 20 minutes later, Janet emerged with signed paperwork and a smile that could have lit up the entire neighborhood. She saw my truck and gave me a subtle thumbs up before driving away. It was done. I owned 47 Maple Street. I owned the house where Sarah grew up, where her parents had lived for 25 years, where they'd built their perfect little kingdom of casual cruelty and social climbing. More importantly, I now owned the deed to their humiliation. My phone rang. "Sarah, Marcus, you'll never believe what just happened. Mom and Dad just sold the house." "Really? That's crazy. Who bought it?" "We don't know yet. Some anonymous buyer. But Marcus, they got so much money for it. They're talking about moving to Florida, buying a condo on the beach. That's great for them." "I know, right? And the best part is the new owner wants to close right after New Year's, so they'll have time to find a place and move without rushing." Sounds perfect. I'm so excited for them.
This is like winning the lottery. I could hear the happiness in her voice, genuine joy for her parents' good fortune. It made what I was about to do both easier and harder at the same time. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. What? I took a deep breath. I'm the buyer, silence. Long, stretched silence that seemed to last forever. What did you say? I bought your parents' house. I'm the anonymous buyer. More silence. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from her before. You did what? I bought the house, Sarah. I own it now. But why? How? I don't understand. I've been buying properties in this neighborhood for months. Your parents' house was just the latest acquisition. Acquisition? Her voice was getting higher, more strained. Marcus, that's my childhood home. That's where I grew up. I know. You can't just buy someone's house without telling them who you are. That's insane. Actually, I can. And I did. I could hear her breathing fast and shallow. How much did you pay? I told her. She gasped. Marcus, we don't have that kind of money. Actually, we do. My company's worth about $4 million. The downtown contract alone is worth $2.6 million. Another long silence. $4 million, she whispered. Give or take. And you never told me. You never asked. That wasn't entirely fair, but it was true. Sarah had always shown more interest in her parents' opinion of my income than in the actual numbers. Marcus, I don't understand what's happening. Why would you do this? Because they put me in the garage, Sarah. Because they treat me like trash. Because you laughed when your mother made jokes about me sleeping in the cold. I wasn't. Yes, you were. I heard you. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally she spoke, her voice small and broken. What happens now? Now your parents have enough money to buy their condo in Florida, and I have a house to renovate. And us? That was the question I'd been dreading, the one I didn't have a good answer for. I don't know, Sarah. I honestly don't know. I hung up and sat in my truck, watching the Morrison house through the falling snow. Inside, my wife was probably crying. Her parents were probably celebrating their windfall while simultaneously panicking about where they'd live. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was asking if this was really the man I wanted to be. But then I remembered the garage, the cold, the laughter, the casual cruelty of people who thought they were better than me because of where I came from and how I made my living. I started the truck and drove away, leaving the Morrison family to figure out their new reality. Tomorrow was Christmas, and I had plans to make, big plans, the kind that would change everything forever. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though it was only 15 minutes from the Morrison house to my place in the warehouse district. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Sarah, but I let them go to voicemail. I needed time to think, time to process what I'd just set in motion. My house was nothing like the Morrison suburban palace. It was a converted warehouse that I'd bought for cheap and renovated myself over the past 3 years. Exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, concrete floors that I'd polished until they gleamed. It was masculine, functional, and completely mine. No white leather couches or crystal figurines. No rules about where you could sit or what you could touch. I parked in the garage and sat for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Through the connecting door, I could see my workshop, tools arranged with military precision on pegboards and workbenches. This was where I came to think, to work with my hands, to remember who I was before I married into the Morrison family. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at my kitchen island, staring at my phone. 17 missed calls from Sarah, 12 text messages. I could imagine her panic, the way she got when her perfectly ordered world shifted even slightly. The first voicemail was pure confusion. Marcus, I don't understand what's happening. Please call me back. Please. The second was anger. How could you do this without telling me? This is insane, Marcus. Completely insane. By the 5th, she was crying. Please just come back. We need to talk about this. My parents are going crazy. I deleted them all without listening to the rest.
My laptop was on the counter where I'd left it that morning. I opened it and pulled up the files Janet had sent me. Property deeds, transfer documents, financial records, all of it legal, all of it binding. The Morrison family had signed away their home to a stranger, and that stranger was me. But that wasn't the only secret I'd been keeping. I opened another folder, one labeled Maple Street Acquisitions. Inside were deeds for 6 other properties on the Morrisons' block. The Victorian on the corner that I'd bought in September, the duplex across the street from October, the apartment building 2 doors down from November. Each purchase had been carefully orchestrated. Shell companies with innocuous names, real estate agents who specialized in discretion, sellers who were motivated by cash offers and quick closings. I'd been methodical, patient, building my empire one property at a time, but there was more, much more. I clicked on another file, this one labeled Financial Research. Inside were bank statements, credit reports, court documents, everything I'd been able to dig up on the Morrison family over the past 6 months. Richard Morrison wasn't the successful businessman he pretended to be. His construction supply company had been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. Bad investments, poor management, and a gambling habit that his wife didn't know about. He owed money to 3 different casinos, had maxed out 4 credit cards, and was behind on the mortgage payments for their precious house. Patricia's charity work was a joke. The foundation she claimed to run existed only on paper. She'd been using the donations to fund her shopping addiction and spa weekends. The IRS was already sniffing around, and it was only a matter of time before someone filed a complaint. Kevin was the worst of all. His marketing job was entry-level at best, but he'd been living like a millionaire. Designer clothes, expensive cars, a downtown apartment he couldn't afford. He'd been financing it all with credit cards and personal loans, using his parents' house as collateral without their knowledge. The Morrison family was broke. Worse than broke, they were drowning in debt and lies. The only thing keeping them afloat was the equity in their house, and now that belonged to me. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Sarah. Marcus, the voice was shaky, uncertain. Patricia Morrison, calling from what used to be her house. Hello, Patricia. We need to talk about the house, about what you've done. What's to talk about? You sold me your house, fair and square, but you lied to us. You made us think you were a stranger. I never said I was a stranger. Your real estate agent said the buyer wished to remain anonymous. You could have asked who it was before you signed. Silence. She was trying to find an angle, some way to make this my fault. This is revenge, she said finally. Because of last night, because of the garage. Is it? You're angry about the sleeping arrangements. Am I? Marcus, please. We can work this out. We can give you your money back. With what money, Patricia? Another silence, longer this time. I know about Richard's gambling debts, I continued. I know about your charity fraud. I know about Kevin's credit cards. You need that money I paid you. You need it desperately. Her breathing was audible through the phone. Quick, shallow, panicked. How do you know about that? I make it my business to know about people who treat me like garbage. We never treated you like garbage. You put me in the garage, Patricia, on Christmas Eve, while your family laughed about it upstairs. That was just, we didn't have anywhere else. You had a couch. You had a basement. You chose the garage because you wanted to humiliate me. She was crying now, soft sobs that she was trying to hide. What do you want from us? Nothing. You've already given me everything I need. The house. The house is just the beginning. I hung up and poured myself another bourbon. Outside, snow was still falling, covering the warehouse district in pristine white. It was peaceful here, quiet. No family drama, no social climbing, no pretense. Just me and my thoughts, and the empire I'd been building in secret. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Congratulations on closing the Morrison deal. What's next? I typed back quickly. The Hendricks property, 2 doors east of Morrison. Make an offer tomorrow. How much? I thought about it.
The Hendricks were an elderly couple, probably worried about their retirement finances.
A generous offer might be just what they needed. 20% above market, cash deal. You're going to own the entire block at this rate. That's the plan. Another text, this one from my foreman at the downtown job site. Boss, we need you here. The city inspector is asking questions about the permits. I sighed and finished my bourbon. Work never stopped, even on Christmas Eve. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, but my phone rang before I could leave. Sarah, this time I answered. Marcus, where are you? Home, getting ready to head to the job site. On Christmas Eve, construction doesn't take holidays. We need to talk, face to face. I'm listening, not over the phone. This is too important. I checked my watch. The inspector would wait. He knew I was good for any problems, and the bribes I'd been paying him all year would buy me some patience. Where? Somewhere neutral. Not my parents' house, not your place. Somewhere we can actually talk. The diner on 5th Street. 1 hour. Thank you. The diner was a throwback to the 1950s, all chrome and red vinyl and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick. It was also loud enough that we could have a private conversation without being overheard. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was keeping her alive. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way I'd never seen before. I slid into the opposite seat and ordered coffee from the waitress. Sarah stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. $4 million, she said without preamble, give or take. And you never told me. You never asked. That's not fair. And you know it. She was right, but I wasn't feeling particularly fair at the moment. How long have you been planning this? She asked. Planning what? Buying my parents' house. Buying the whole neighborhood. About 6 months. 6 months. She shook her head slowly. And you never said a word. Would you have tried to stop me? Of course I would have stopped you. This is insane, Marcus. You can't just buy people's houses out from under them. They were happy to sell, because they didn't know it was you. The waitress brought my coffee. I added sugar and stirred slowly, giving Sarah time to process. Why? She asked finally. You really need to ask. Yes, I really need to ask. Because the Marcus I married wouldn't do something like this. The Marcus you married was naive enough to think your family would eventually accept him. They do accept you. They put me in the garage, Sarah. It was one night. It was a symbol of exactly how they see me. How you see me. That's not true. You laughed. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't mean to laugh, but you did. You sat in your childhood bedroom and laughed with your mother about how pathetic I looked when she told me to sleep in the garage. I was nervous. I laugh when I'm nervous, you know that. You were embarrassed. Of me. Of being married to someone they consider beneath them. That's not true. Then why didn't you stand up for me? Why didn't you demand they treat me with basic human dignity? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. We both knew why. You want to fit in with them more than you want to defend me. I said. You want their approval more than my respect. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Sarah. But you're about to learn that it can be just. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her the folder labeled Maple Street Acquisitions. I own 6 houses on your parents' block. 7, counting theirs. By the end of January, I'll own 9. By spring, I'll own them all. Her face went white. All of them, every single one. But why? What's the point? The point is power. The point is control. The point is showing people who thought I was nothing that I'm everything. This isn't you, Marcus. This isn't who you are. How do you know who I am? You've been married to me for 4 years, and you never bothered to ask how much money I make. You never asked about my business plans or my investments or my dreams. You just assumed I was some blue-collar guy who was lucky to have landed a Morrison. I never thought that. Your family did, and you let them. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "What do you want me to do? How do I fix this?" "You can't fix this, Sarah. It's too late for that. There has to be something, some way to make this right." I finished my coffee and left money on the table. "The only way to make this right is to understand that it was never wrong in the first place." "Where are you going?" "To work. Unlike some people, I have responsibilities." "Marcus, please, don't walk away from this. Don't walk away from us." I stopped at the edge of the booth. "I'm not walking away from anything. I'm walking towards something better." The job site was chaos when I arrived. The city inspector was red-faced and shouting at my foreman about permit violations that didn't exist. Two of my subcontractors were arguing about schedule conflicts. A delivery truck was blocking traffic because the driver couldn't find the right entrance. This was my real world. Problems to solve, people to manage, work to get done. Not family drama or social climbing, or pretending to be something I wasn't. "Boss," my foreman called out when he saw me. "Thank God you're here. This guy is saying we don't have proper electrical permits for the 4th floor." I walked over to the inspector, a thin man with nervous eyes who'd been taking my money for 8 months. "What seems to be the problem, Bill?" "Marcus, I'm sorry, but downtown is breathing down my neck about this project. They want everything by the book. Everything is by the book. You know that." "I know, but my supervisor is asking questions." I guided him away from the crowd toward my trailer office. Inside, I opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "Every permit, every inspection, every approval," I said, spreading the documents across my desk. "All signed, all dated, all legitimate." Bill scanned the papers nervously. "These look good. But what? They're what?" "There are rumors, Marcus, about you buying up property in Riverside, about having too much money for a small-time contractor." I sat back in my chair and studied him. Bill was sweating despite the December cold, his hands shaking slightly as he held the permits. "Someone's been asking questions about me," I said. "It wasn't a question. I didn't say that. You didn't have to." "Who?" "I can't tell you that." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside was $10,000 in cash, Bill's usual Christmas bonus. "Who?" "Bill." He stared at the money, then at me, then back at the money. "Some private investigator. He came around last week asking about your permits, your inspections, your business practices." "Stevens." "Michael Stevens, who hired him." "He didn't say." "But Marcus, this guy knew things about your bank accounts, your property purchases, your contracts. Someone with money hired him. Someone with connections." I put the envelope back in the drawer without giving it to him. "Tell your supervisor that everything is in order. Tell him any further questions should be directed to my attorney." "Marcus, the money, you'll get it when this problem goes away permanently." After Bill left, I sat alone in my trailer and thought about who might be investigating me. The Morrison family didn't have the money or connections to hire a private investigator. They were too busy trying to figure out how to pay their own bills. But someone else might. Someone with a vested interest in stopping my property acquisitions. Someone who saw me as a threat to their own plans. I pulled out my laptop and did some research on Michael Stevens, private investigator, former police detective, specializing in financial crimes and real estate fraud. His client list was impressive and expensive. One name stood out: Blackwood Development Corporation. I'd never heard of them before, but a quick search revealed everything I needed to know. They were a property development company that specialized in buying up entire neighborhoods, tearing down existing structures, and building luxury condos and shopping centers. They'd been eyeing the Riverside district for months, waiting for property values to drop enough to make mass acquisition profitable. My purchases were driving prices up, making their plans more expensive and complicated. But there was more. Blackwood's CEO was a man named Jonathan Pierce, and when I searched his name, I found something interesting.
He was married to Rebecca Morrison Pierce, Richard Morrison's sister, Sarah's aunt. The family was fighting back, using connections I didn't know they had. They'd called in the cavalry, hoping to stop me before I could complete my plans. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought I was just some angry husband acting out of spite. They didn't understand that this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my attorney, warning him to expect legal challenges to my property purchases. The second was to my banker, moving money around to make my assets harder to trace. The third was to Janet.
I need you to accelerate the timeline, I told her. Instead of spring, I want to own the entire block by the end of January. Marcus, that's ambitious. Some of these property owners aren't even considering selling. Make them consider it. Generous offers, cash deals, quick closings, whatever it takes. This is going to cost you. I have the money. What's the rush? Someone's trying to stop me. I need to move faster than they can react. After I hung up, I locked up the trailer and headed back to my truck. It was getting dark, and the snow was falling harder. Christmas Eve, and I was working late while my wife was probably at her parents' house, crying about what her terrible husband had done to her poor family. But as I drove through the quiet streets of Milwaukee, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose, direction, the kind of clarity that comes from finally understanding exactly what you're fighting for. I wasn't just buying houses anymore. I was building something bigger, something that would outlast the Morrison family's disapproval and Blackwood Development's interference and Sarah's tears. I was building an empire. My phone rang as I pulled into my garage. Unknown number. Marcus Torres. Yes, this is Michael Stevens. I think we need to talk. Do we? I know what you're doing in Riverside. I know about your property acquisitions. I know about your plans for the Morrison family.
Yeah.
Then you know I haven't done anything illegal.
Yeah.
Legal and right aren't the same thing.
Yeah.
Since when do private investigators care about right and wrong?
Yeah.
Since I started looking into your background, you're not the villain in this story, Marcus, but you're about to become one if you don't stop. I parked in my garage and sat in the dark, listening to this stranger who claimed to know me better than I knew myself.
Yeah.
What do you want? I asked. A meeting, 1 hour of your time, neutral ground. Why? Because the people who hired me aren't going to stop with just investigating you. They're going to try to destroy you. And if that happens, innocent people are going to get hurt. What innocent people? Your wife, for starters. I gripped the phone tighter. What are you talking about? Meet me and find out.
Tomorrow, Christmas Day, noon.
The parking lot of the old Riverside Church on 5th Street. And if I don't, then you'll find out the hard way how far some people will go to protect their interests. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my truck for a long time.
Yeah.
Thinking about threats and consequences and the price of getting everything you think you want. Through my garage window, I could see the lights of downtown Milwaukee, the skyline I was helping to build with my construction company. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably lying in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering how her marriage had turned into a war zone. Her parents were probably counting their money and trying to figure out how to spin this disaster into something that wasn't their fault. And somewhere else,
People I'd never met were planning my destruction.
but they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought I was the same person who'd meekly accepted a sleeping bag in the garage, who'd smiled and nodded while they insulted me to my face. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I got out of my truck and walked into my house, already planning my next move. Tomorrow was Christmas, but it wouldn't be about family or forgiveness or peace on earth. Tomorrow would be about war, and I intended to win. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of bitter wind that cuts through everything. I woke up at 5:30, not because of any alarm, but because my mind wouldn't let me rest. Today would change everything, one way or another. The old Riverside Church had been abandoned for 3 years, ever since the congregation moved to their new building in the suburbs. It sat like a monument to forgotten promises,
its stained glass windows boarded up, and its parking lot cracked with weeds growing through the asphalt. It was the perfect place for a conversation nobody wanted to have. I arrived at 11:45, 20 minutes early, because being late to this kind of meeting was the same as admitting weakness. The parking lot was empty, except for a black sedan parked near the church entrance. Michael Stevens was leaning against the hood, smoking a cigarette, and watching me with the kind of patience that came from years of waiting for people to make bad decisions. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the build of someone who stayed in shape, but didn't make a show of it. His coat was expensive but not flashy, and when he stubbed out his cigarette and walked toward my truck, he moved with the easy confidence of a man who was comfortable with violence but didn't need to prove it. "Torres," he said, extending his hand. "Stevens." We shook hands like civilized people, but there was nothing civilized about this meeting. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure you would. You mentioned my wife. That got my attention. Let's talk inside. It's warmer, and we won't be interrupted." He produced a key from his coat pocket and unlocked a side door to the church. The interior was dim and musty, filled with the echoes of abandoned worship. Dust motes danced in the colored light that filtered through the few unboarded windows, and our footsteps echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Friend of mine is the security company," Stevens explained, leading me to a pew near the front. "He lets me use this place when I need somewhere quiet to think." We sat facing each other across the aisle, two men in an empty church on Christmas morning, about to discuss the destruction of everything I'd built. "So," I said, "Blackwood Development." Stevens smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You did your homework, some of it. Fill in the blanks." He pulled out a manila folder and set it on the pew between us. "Jonathan Pierce has been planning to redevelop the Riverside district for 2 years. Luxury condos, high-end retail, the whole gentrification package. The kind of project that makes men like him very rich. And my property purchases are interfering with that. In a big way, you've driven up property values, made the remaining owners less willing to sell, and complicated his timeline. Pierce doesn't like complications, so he hired you to investigate me." Among other things, Stevens opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed me leaving the Morrison house on Christmas Eve, carrying my sleeping bag, and looking like exactly what I was, a man who'd been humiliated and was planning something about it. "Pierce's wife is Rebecca Morrison Pierce," Stevens continued. "When her brother Richard called asking for help dealing with his upstart son-in-law, she was happy to oblige." "What kind of help?" "The kind that ruins lives permanently." He pulled out another document, this one typed on official letterhead. "Blackwood has connections with the City Planning Commission, the Zoning Board, the Mayor's Office. They were going to challenge every permit you've ever been issued, every inspection you've ever passed, every contract you've ever signed." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "We're going to." Past tense, yeah, because I talked them out of it. "Why would you do that?" Stevens leaned back in the pew and studied me with the kind of look cops gave suspects they were trying to figure out. "Because I've been watching you for 2 weeks, and you're not the monster they think you are. I bought their house out from under them, after they put you in a garage like a dog. I'm planning to buy their entire neighborhood. To prove a point, not to hurt innocent people. How do you know what my motives are?" "Because I know what revenge looks like, and this isn't it. This is justice. There's a difference." He pulled out another photograph, this one showing Richard Morrison entering a casino at 2 in the morning. "Your father-in-law owes $68,000 to 3 different gambling operations. He's been using company funds to pay interest, which is why his business is failing." Another photo, Patricia Morrison shopping at stores that cost more per hour than most people made in a week. "Your mother-in-law has run up $83,000 in credit card debt. She's been forging charity documents to skim donations." A third photo, Kevin Morrison signing papers at a payday loan office. "Your brother-in-law has borrowed against his parents' house without their knowledge. If you hadn't bought it when you did, the bank would have foreclosed in March. I stared at the photographs, feeling pieces of a puzzle falling into place. You're saying I saved them. I'm saying you saved them from themselves. The money you paid for that house is the only thing standing between the Morrison family and complete financial ruin. And Blackwood Development wants to destroy me for it. Wanted to. Past tense. Stevens gathered up the photographs and put them back in the folder. I convinced Pierce that going after you would bring too much attention to his own business practices. The man has secrets he doesn't want exposed. What kind of secrets? The kind that involve city contracts and campaign contributions and zoning variances that shouldn't exist. Pierce is dirty, but he's smart dirty. He knows when to back down. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. So they're calling off the investigation. They're calling off the legal challenges. The investigation is a different matter. Meaning, Stevens stood up and walked to the front of the church, where a wooden cross still hung above the abandoned altar, meaning Pierce still wants to redevelop Riverside, and he still sees you as an obstacle. He can't destroy you legally, so he's going to try a different approach, which is, he's going to try to buy you out, make you an offer you can't refuse. What if I refuse anyway? Stevens turned back to face me, and for the first time since we'd started talking, he looked genuinely concerned. Then things get complicated. Pierce has friends in places you don't want to make enemies. Police friends, judge friends, the kind of friends who can make your life very difficult without technically breaking any laws. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. There's a difference. I stood up and faced him across the empty church. What do you want from me, Stevens? I want you to be smart. Pierce is going to make you an offer in the next few days, something generous, maybe even more than your properties are worth. Take it, walk away, find somewhere else to build your empire. And if I don't, then you're going to learn why men like Pierce stay rich and men like you end up in prison. I walked toward the door, then stopped. You said innocent people would get hurt if this escalated. Your wife, Pierce knows about her, knows she's the weak link. If you won't be reasonable, he'll use her to make you reasonable. How? Sarah works at that boutique downtown, right? The one her friend owns, that building Pierce owns. One phone call from him, and she's unemployed. Another phone call and she's unemployable anywhere in the city. The cold feeling in my stomach turned to ice. That's just the beginning. Pierce has resources you can't imagine. He can make your wife disappear from polite society completely. No job, no friends, no future, and all perfectly legal. I turned around slowly. You're telling me to surrender everything I've worked for because some rich asshole might hurt my wife. I'm telling you to choose your battles wisely. And what if I choose to fight anyway? Stevens smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Then I hope you're as tough as you think you are. I left the church without another word, but I could feel Stevens watching me through the window as I drove away. The meeting had answered some questions, but it had raised others. If Pierce was backing down from legal challenges, why was Stevens still involved? Why meet me at all, unless there was something else going on? The answer came to me as I was driving through downtown Milwaukee, past the construction sites and development projects that were changing the city's skyline. Stevens wasn't working for Pierce anymore. He was working for himself. Private investigators didn't make speeches about justice and innocence unless they had skin in the game. Stevens had found something during his investigation, something that made him switch sides. The question was what?
I spent Christmas afternoon at my office, going through files and making phone calls to people who owed me favors. By evening, I had my answer. Michael Stevens had a daughter named Amy who lived in the Riverside district. She was 16, went to the local high school, and lived with her grandmother in one of the houses that Blackwood Development wanted to tear down. Stevens wasn't just investigating me for Pierce, he was protecting his own family. The realization changed everything. Stevens had found something that made him believe I was on the right side of this fight, something that convinced him to warn me instead of helping Pierce destroy me. But what? My phone rang as I was locking up the office. Sarah. Marcus, where are you? Work. Why? Because it's Christmas and you're supposed to be with your family. Are you my family, Sarah? Or are you a Morrison first and a Torres second? Silence. Long, painful silence. That's not fair, she said finally. Today's been a day for unfair questions. We need to talk. Really talk. Not like yesterday at the diner. About what? About what happens next. About whether we're going to save our marriage or destroy it completely. I thought about Pierce's threats, about Stephen's warnings, about the choice between safety and justice that was tearing my world apart. Where do you want to meet? Home. Your home. I'm already here. I found Sarah sitting at my kitchen island, still wearing the dress she'd worn to Christmas dinner with her parents. She looked exhausted, like someone who'd been crying for hours and had finally run out of tears. They hate you, she said without preamble. I know. They blame you for everything. The house, the money, the fact that their lives are falling apart. Do you blame me? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. I don't know. Part of me does. Which part? The part that grew up in that house. The part that learned to value their approval more than anything else. And the other part knows they brought this on themselves. The gambling, the debt, the lies. You didn't create their problems, Marcus. You just exposed them. I sat down across from her, the same position we'd been in at the diner, but something was different now. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. Stevens came to see me today, I said. Who's Stevens? I told her about the investigation, about Pierce and Blackwood development, about the threats and the choice I was facing. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each revelation. So what are you going to do? She asked, when I finished. I don't know. Pierce is going to make me an offer. Stevens thinks I should take it. And you think? I think I'm tired of rich people telling me what I can and can't do with my own money. Sarah stood up and walked to the window that overlooked downtown. You know what the funny thing is? My parents always said you weren't good enough for me. Not rich enough, not sophisticated enough, not important enough. They were right. No, they weren't. You're richer than they ever were. You built something real while they were living on borrowed time and other people's money. You're everything they pretended to be. She turned back to face me. But you're also becoming everything they actually are. What do you mean? You're using money as a weapon. You're hurting people to make yourself feel better. You're letting pride and anger turn you into someone I don't recognize. They humiliated me, Sarah. And now you're humiliating them. When does it end? When they understand that I'm not the powerless nobody they thought I was. And then what? After you've proven your point and bought their entire neighborhood and shown them who's boss, then what? I didn't have an answer for that. You're destroying our marriage to win a war against people who aren't worth winning against, Sarah continued. My parents are flawed, Marcus. They're petty and shallow, and sometimes cruel, but they're not evil. They don't deserve to have their lives destroyed. They destroyed their own lives. I just bought the evidence. You could have helped them. You could have been the bigger person. I tried being the bigger person for 4 years. It got me a sleeping bag in the garage. Sarah walked back to the island and sat down, close enough that I could smell her perfume. What if there was another way? What way? What if you used your money to fix things instead of breaking them? What if you helped my parents instead of destroying them? Why would I do that? Because you love me, because they're my family, and families are supposed to take care of each other. Even families that put you in the garage. Especially families that put you in the garage. That's what forgiveness means, Marcus. It means being better than the people who hurt you. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw something I'd been missing. She wasn't choosing her family over me. She was choosing love over revenge, forgiveness over justice, healing over destruction. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to be the man I married. The man who builds things instead of tearing them down. My phone rang before I could answer. Unknown number. Torres. Mr. Torres. This is Jonathan Pierce. I believe we have some business to discuss. Sarah's eyes widened. She could hear Pierce's voice through the phone. Do we? I think you know we do. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss a proposition that could benefit both of us. What kind of proposition? The kind that's better discussed in person. Shall we say 10 o'clock at my office? I'll think about it. Don't think too long, Mr. Torres. Opportunities like this don't last forever. He hung up without waiting for a response. Sarah was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Fear, maybe. Or hope. That was him, she said. That was him. What are you going to do? I thought about Stephen's warnings, about Pierce's threats, about the choice between safety and justice that was tearing everything apart. I'm going to meet with him, and then I'm going to make a decision that I can live with. The next morning I drove to Pierce's office in downtown Milwaukee, a glass tower that scraped the winter sky and gleamed with the kind of wealth that never worried about garage sleeping arrangements. The lobby was all marble and mahogany, the kind of place where they probably charged you for breathing the air. Pierce's office was on the 40th floor, with windows that looked out over the entire city. He was standing at those windows when his secretary showed me in, hands clasped behind his back like a general surveying a battlefield. Mr. Torres, he said without turning around, thank you for coming. He was taller than I'd expected, with silver hair and the kind of presence that came from decades of getting everything he wanted. When he finally turned to face me, his smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Please, sit down. Can I offer you coffee? Water? I'm fine. Straight to business then. I like that. He moved to his desk and gestured to a chair across from it. I assume Mr. Stevens filled you in on our mutual interests. He mentioned you wanted to buy me out, in a manner of speaking. What I want is to resolve our conflict in a way that benefits everyone involved. He opened a folder on his desk and pulled out a document. I'm prepared to offer you $12 million for your Riverside properties. The number hit me like a physical blow. 12 million, more than double what I'd paid for everything combined. That's generous. I managed. It's more than generous, it's transformative. $12 million, Mr. Torres. Enough to retire comfortably, start fresh somewhere else, build whatever empire you want without interference from me. And all I have to do is walk away from everything I've worked for. You'd be walking towards something better. $12 million buys a lot of freedom. I thought about Sarah's words, about forgiveness and healing and being the bigger person. $12 million would solve a lot of problems. It would pay off the Morrison family's debts with money left over. It would give Sarah and me a fresh start somewhere else. What's the catch? Pierce smiled. No catch. Just a simple business transaction between reasonable men. And if I'm not reasonable, the smile faded. Then you'll discover that some fights aren't worth winning. There it was. The threat wrapped in silk, the iron fist in the velvet glove. I need time to think about it. Of course. But don't take too long. Offers like this have expiration dates. I stood up to leave, but Pierce's voice stopped me at the door. Mr. Torres, your wife is a lovely woman. It would be a shame if she got caught in the crossfire of our disagreement. I turned around slowly. Are you threatening my wife? I'm simply observing that conflicts have a way of affecting innocent bystanders. I'm sure you want to keep her safe. The ride down 40 floors gave me plenty of time to think about what I'd just heard. Pierce was smooth, sophisticated, everything the Morrison family thought they were. But underneath the polish was the same casual cruelty I'd experienced in their garage. The difference was that Pierce had the power to back up his threats. I drove home through the gray Milwaukee morning, past the construction sites and development projects that were reshaping the city. Somewhere in those buildings were the offices where Pierce's friends worked, the judges and politicians and police commissioners who owed him favors. But I'd been building something too, not just an empire of properties, but a network of relationships with honest people who respected what I'd accomplished. Contractors and suppliers and city workers who knew I was fair, reliable, trustworthy. The question was whether that would be enough. Sarah was waiting for me when I got home, still in her robe, coffee growing cold on the counter.
How did it go? I told her about the meeting, about Pierce's offer and his thinly veiled threats. She listened without interrupting, but I could see the fear growing in her eyes. $12 million, she said when I finished. $12 million. That's enough to pay off my parents' debts and still have plenty left over. It is. You're going to take it, aren't you? I looked at my wife, at the woman I'd loved for 8 years, and realized that everything came down to this moment.
This choice, this decision that would define who I was and who I wanted to be. No, I said. Marcus, he threatened me. I know, if you don't take his offer, he'll destroy both of us. He'll try. Why risk everything for a bunch of houses in a neighborhood you didn't even care about 6 months ago? Because it's not about the houses, Sarah. It's about the principle. What principle? That men like Pierce don't get to decide how the story ends. That money and connections and threats don't automatically win. That sometimes the little guy gets to keep what he's earned. Sarah set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. And if you're wrong, if he destroys us, then at least we'll go down fighting. I reached across the counter and took her hand. If you'll stand with me. She was quiet for a long time, staring at our joined hands. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but her voice was steady. What do you need me to do? The answer came from an unexpected source. My phone rang, and when I answered it, Stephen's voice was tight with urgency. Torres, we need to meet. Now. What's wrong? Pierce isn't waiting for your answer. He's moving against you already. What do you mean? Check your email. Then call me back. The email was from the City Planning Commission, dated that morning. Notice of investigation into permit irregularities for all Torres construction projects. Effective immediately. All work was suspended pending review. I called Stevens back. How long do I have? Maybe a week before this hits the newspapers. After that, your reputation is finished, even if you're eventually cleared. Can you stop it? Not me, but I know someone who can. Who? Meet me at the church again. 1 hour. And Torres, bring your wife. The ride to the abandoned church was silent. Sarah stared out the window at the grey December landscape, while I tried to figure out what Stevens had discovered that might save us. He was waiting for us inside, pacing between the empty pews like a caged animal. With him was a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, with the kind of professional bearing that suggested government work. Torres, Mrs. Torres, Stevens said. This is Agent Catherine Walsh, FBI. My blood turned to ice. FBI. Financial Crimes Division, Walsh said, stepping forward. Mr. Stevens contacted us about some irregularities he discovered during his investigation of your business practices. What kind of irregularities? Not yours. Pierce's. She opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. It seems Mr. Pierce has been very careless about documenting his relationships with city officials. Stevens smiled grimly. While I was investigating you, I started noticing patterns in Pierce's development projects. Permits approved unusually quickly, zoning variances that shouldn't exist, city contracts awarded without proper bidding. So I started digging deeper, Walsh continued. What we found was a corruption network involving dozens of city officials, millions of dollars in bribes, and enough evidence to put Pierce away for 20 years. I felt like I'd been hit by lightning. You're saying Pierce is going to prison. We're saying Pierce is going to have more important things to worry about than your real estate purchases, Stevens said. The indictments come down next week. Sarah grabbed my arm. Is this real? Very real, Walsh said. Mr. Pierce made the mistake of threatening a federal witness. What federal witness? Stevens smiled. Me. I've been wearing a wire for the past month, including during my conversation with Pierce yesterday. Everything he said about destroying your business and hurting your wife is on tape. The relief was so intense I had to sit down. Pierce was finished.
The investigation into my permits would disappear when its source was arrested. The threats against Sarah would end when Pierce was in federal custody. There is one condition, Walsh said. What condition? You testify at Pierce's trial. Tell the jury about his threats, his attempts to force you out of the real estate market. Of course. And you cooperate with our investigation into his network. Help us identify other victims, other targets. I looked at Sarah, who nodded. Whatever you need. Walsh closed her briefcase and stood to leave. Mr. Stevens will be in touch with the details. Congratulations, Mr. Torres. You've won. After she left, Stevens and I sat in the empty church while Sarah explored the abandoned sanctuary. Why? I asked. Why? What why? Did you help me? You could have just walked away after Pierce was arrested. Stevens was quiet for a moment, staring at the wooden cross above the altar. You remember I mentioned I have a daughter, Amy. She lives with my ex-wife in one of the houses Pierce wanted to tear down. When I saw what he was planning for the neighborhood, saw how he was going to destroy people's lives for profit, I couldn't just walk away. So you decided to take him down. I decided to do the right thing for once. It's been a while. Sarah returned from her exploration of the church, her face thoughtful. This place could be beautiful again, she said. With the right renovation, the right vision. I looked around at the dust and shadows, trying to see what she saw. It would take a lot of work. Everything worthwhile takes a lot of work. Stevens stood up and headed for the door. I'll leave you two alone. Congratulations on keeping your empire, Torres. After he left, Sarah and I sat together in the empty church, listening to the wind rattle the boarded windows. So what happens now? She asked. Now we go home. We rebuild our marriage. We figure out how to be happy again. And my parents. I thought about the Morrison family, probably sitting in their empty house, counting their windfall money, and wondering what came next. What do you want to happen with your parents? I want them to be okay. I want us all to be okay. Then we'll make sure they're okay, even after everything they did. Especially after everything they did. You were right, Sarah. Forgiveness is stronger than revenge. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colored light filter through the unboarded windows. Somewhere in the distance, church bells were ringing, calling people to evening services on the day after Christmas. Marcus, yeah, I'm proud of you. For what? For being the man I always knew you could be. 3 months later, I stood in the Morrison family's former living room, now my living room, watching contractors install new hardwood floors. The house was going to be beautiful when we finished renovating it. Sarah had been right about that. The Morrison family had used their windfall money to buy a modest condo in Florida, close to the beach and far from the debts and lies that had defined their life in Milwaukee. Richard had gotten help for his gambling addiction. Patricia had started volunteering at a legitimate charity. Kevin had moved to Chicago and was slowly paying down his loans. They still didn't like me much, but they'd stopped actively hating me. Progress. Pierce was in federal prison, awaiting trial on corruption charges that would probably keep him locked up for the rest of his life. Blackwood Development had been dissolved, its assets seized by the government. Stevens had taken early retirement from private investigation and was teaching criminal justice at the local community college. His daughter Amy was doing well in school and had no idea how close she'd come to losing her home. The Riverside district was thriving. My property investments had stabilized the neighborhood, attracted new businesses, improved the quality of life for long-time residents. The empire I'd built wasn't just profitable, it was making a difference. Sarah appeared in the doorway, blueprints in her hand and dust in her hair. The contractor wants to know about the master bedroom, she said. Crown molding, or no crown molding, whatever you think looks best. Crown molding it is. She paused, studying my face. You're thinking about Christmas Eve again, aren't you? How can you tell? You get this look, like you're trying to figure out if you should be angry or grateful. She was right. I thought about that night often, about sleeping in the garage while my wife's family laughed about me upstairs. It seemed like a lifetime ago. I keep wondering what would have happened if I'd just accepted it. I said, if I'd slept in the garage and kept my mouth shut, and pretended it was okay, you'd still be sleeping in the garage, metaphorically speaking. And now, Sarah smiled and gestured around the room that had once belonged to her parents. Now you own the whole house. We own the whole house. Right, we. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Another property was coming on the market, 3 blocks away. The owner was motivated. The price was reasonable. The location was perfect. I showed the text to Sarah. Another house, another opportunity. Are you going to buy it? I thought about empires and revenge, and the difference between building something and destroying it. I thought about Pierce rotting in prison, and the Morrison family starting over in Florida. I thought about second chances, and the price of forgiveness. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Why? Because I'm not done building yet. Sarah kissed my cheek and headed back to her blueprints. Just remember to leave room for a guest bedroom. You never know when family might want to visit. Even family that puts you in the garage. Especially family that puts you in the garage. That's when you know they really need you. I looked around the room that had once represented everything I couldn't have, everything I wasn't good enough for. Now it was just another room in another house in an empire, built on the foundation of one humiliating Christmas Eve. Some people get revenge, some people get rich, some people get both. But the luckiest people get the chance to choose forgiveness over revenge, building over destroying, love over anger. I was one of the lucky ones. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.